Hello YouTube and welcome to the next route learning video. On today's video we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Racetrack Aurora to Chicago route, and we're going to be driving one of the default scenarios which comes with the route, which is called Chicago Bound Express. We will be driving between Aurora and Chicago Union Station, which is a distance of around 37 miles. Along the way we will be calling at Route 59, Naperville, Lisle, Belmont and Downers Grove Main Street, after which we will then run fast for the remaining 21 miles to Chicago Union Station. Our train for the journey today is formed of an EMD F40PH locomotive, which is going to be at the rear of the train, pushing us into Chicago, and we're going to be driving from the cab car end of the train. The cab car is effectively a passenger coach with a driver's cabin, and it means that you can control the locomotive from there, even though it's at the opposite end of the train. This type of formation is known as push-pull in the UK, but I'm not sure what you call it in the US. The EMD F40PH locomotive is a diesel-electric locomotive built by General Motors Electromotive Division between 1975 and 1992. The maximum speed of these locomotives is 110 miles per hour, with a power output of 3,000 to 3,200 horsepower. Once in the cab of the cab car, the first thing that I'm going to do is turn on the cab lights with the L key. As you can probably notice, it's a bit dark in here. We're actually driving an early morning service, so it will get lighter as we head towards Chicago. The next thing that I'm going to do now is to look up here, and I'm going to turn on where the gauge light switch is, which turns on the instrument lights, so you can now see the instruments much more clearly. So just to say here that this is the main brake gauge that I'm going to be using in the middle there, with the one of the black needles pointing at the 30. The higher that needle is pointing, the harder the brakes are applied. Although there are actually only 4 positions on the brake on this train, I'm not sure if that's prototypical or not, but I actually found it very difficult to judge stopping distances because the brakes seem to either be on too hard or not quite enough. Over here we have the speedometer, which is measured in miles per hour. The maximum speed that we will be able to get up to on this journey today is 70 miles per hour. So here you can see the reversing handle, which is the yellow switch, so I've just put that into forward now. And then next to that there is a black handle, which is the throttle control. And you can see down there a white rectangle which says idle in it. That actually shows us what notch setting we've got the power in, and there are 8 settings on this train. However, when I zoom back to the position I'll be sat in for driving, you can't actually read that very well, so a lot of it involves just counting to try and work out what throttle position we're actually in. Then we have a red lever just here, which is the train brake, which you can see there. So if I apply the brakes more and you release it with the semicolon key down to the full released position, and now you can see all the brake gauges changing and that needle falling below 10 to release the brakes. One thing I would like to say is that I feel that the rolling resistance is wrong on this loco. What that means is that when you cut the power and you're in idle and you're trying to coast, the speed drops far too quickly, as if the brakes are slightly on. I did also notice when driving from the locomotive end of the train that the brakes will not fully release. They actually stick slightly on, which causes you to slow down more than you should, which is why I picked a journey driving from the cab car end. But I must say that the rolling resistance seems wrong because the physics are very similar to the loco end, with slowing down too quickly. The yellow button down here is the alerter reset. That has been simulated on this train. I know that there are many US trains where the alerter has not been simulated, but thankfully it has been on this one. Over here I believe this is the horn, and when you sound the horn the bell automatically turns on, so then you need to press B to turn the bell off should you need to. So I'll just do that now. And also with the bell on this train, I noticed that the ditch lights flash from side to side. Because of the time of morning that we're travelling, I'm not sure if we need to sound the horn at crossings or not, but I'm assuming not, especially as much of this route is a quiet zone. So I'm not going to be using the horn much on the journey today. In fact, not at all, I don't really think, although I will probably use the bell when coming into stations. I'm not sure on the rules of using the bell between certain times of the night, especially in quiet zones. So if I don't get this quite right, please do correct me in the comments, and I do apologise for any mistakes I make on this journey, including mistakes in pronunciations as I don't know the area at all. Now that we've had a quick look around the cab, we're going to take another quick look outside of the train before we depart. Departing from Aurora, I've just put on the bell temporarily, just until we're out of the platform. And at this point, the starting speed limit is 20 miles per hour, with around 5.5 miles to go to our first stop, which is Route 59. On departure from Aurora, one of the first things you'll notice if you've got the HUD on is actually one of the bugs which this train seems to have, and that's if you go above notch 1 of power, then you will get wheel slip immediately, which just doesn't feel right. The interesting thing is it only happens at Aurora station, and not at any of the other stations we depart along this journey. As a result, I waited until I was doing closer to 15 miles per hour before increasing the power. In a moment I'm going to cut the power back to notch 1, which I'm doing now, to try and ensure that we don't break the speed limit. In fact, I'm going to cut it back slightly more, as it looked like we might do. Just after we've rounded this right-hand curve here, which we have done now, the speed limit has gone up to 35 miles per hour. So I'm just going to increase the power a bit, but not increase the power too much, as we need to go between notches 1 and 2 power at 35. And when you shut down or reduce the power to try and maintain a speed, it actually takes a while for the power to reduce, and so you end up keeping accelerating, unless you put the power handle in idle, at which point you then get quite a jolt, which again just doesn't seem quite realistic to me. So I'm now cutting the power back. I believe this is now notch 2 power, but I'm not 100% certain. I'm trying to keep an eye on our speed to ensure that we don't go above 35 miles per hour. Indeed, that was notch 2, I just cut down to notch 1 for a second. It's better. So we're now in notch 1 of power, and we'll just lose a very slight bit of speed as we're in notch 1. In fact, we're getting too close towards 30 now, so I'll go back up to 2 temporarily. As I said, one of the problems is I can't actually see what setting the power handle is in, so it's a bit of guesswork. So what I did a moment ago was shut the power handle off completely so I could recount the notches to make sure that I was in the correct notch. I must say, having now driven this route, this will be the third time, should I say, driving this route right through. I do actually quite like it. I think it's a great route to drive. My only complaint is about the train, which I do feel needs a bit of work on it and some bug fixes before it will be a truly enjoyable experience to drive. I must say I do actually quite like this cab car end, though. Looking out the window feels like looking through the tube of one of those old TV screens, especially one of the old 1980s or maybe 1970s black and white TV screens. I remember when I was a kid having a black and white TV which was a very similar shape to this. No, that doesn't mean that I'm ancient or too old, but just that my parents allowed me to only play the ZX Spectrum computer on an old black and white TV rather than our colour TV downstairs. So we just passed 2 yellow signals, a top and a bottom. This indicates, I believe, that we're turning off in a moment. The speed limit will actually be dropping to 30 miles per hour shortly after this next point. So we're going to cross this point to the left onto the track on our right hand side, and then shortly after that we'll be crossing some points to the right where the speed limit is dropping to 30. I'm just idling the power now and applying light braking to ensure that our speed has come down in time, which it now has, and now back up to notch 1 of power. In fact, it wasn't that point we were going over that I thought we were, it will be the next point to the right hand side. Shortly after crossing over these points, the speed limit will be going up to 55 miles per hour, and then very quickly after that up to 70 miles per hour. So ended up exceeding the speed limit very slightly there. I've just reset the alerter. The red flashing light in the cab was part of the alerter, as well as the beeps which you just heard. So the speed limit is now going up to 55 miles per hour, and we can accelerate towards that as we pass this signal just here. So I'm now sure that the rear of the train has cleared the points. The speed limit will be very quickly going up to 70 miles per hour, in fact is doing just here, and we won't be doing 55 miles per hour before the whole train has cleared the 70 board, so I can just stay in full power now to accelerate towards 70. Once we're at 70 miles per hour, I then need to go between notches 3 and 4 power to try and maintain the speed. We're now passing Eola Yard to our right hand side there. In fact, I believe some of it's also on our left hand side, so we're actually passing through the middle of the yard. Back to what I was saying earlier about this train slowing down too much when the power is in idle. Just to give you an example of how bad it is and why I think it's unrealistic. There's a couple of sections on this route where we'll be going downhill, not too steeply, but we'll be on downhill gradients. And the train still slows down nearly as quick as if we're on a level gradient. Which to me just does not feel like the real life performance of a train. I'm now cutting the power back as we are approaching 70 miles per hour, so I've gone back to notch 4 of power, and I will reduce to notch 3 if necessary to ensure that we don't exceed 70 miles per hour. At this next overbridge coming up just ahead, that means that we've then got around 1 1/3 miles to go to our stop at Route 59. What I'm looking out for now is a siding which will appear on the right hand side. Just after that siding I need to apply the brakes at the signal just after that, and that should be roughly the correct braking point for Route 59 station. So we've now got the siding on the right hand side there. I've just cut the power back. As you can see, we're already starting to slow down, and we've just approached the signal here now. So I'm just going to apply the brakes into the first and lightest setting. You can see our speed is already coming off quite nicely, and you can also see the platforms at Route 59 station illuminated ahead of us. So we're now down to 50 miles per hour. I will increase the braking if necessary to ensure that we can come to a stop. Just to also say I apologise in advance for the lag which you may see in this video. Unfortunately I found that certain sections of this route have quite bad lag, while other sections are completely smooth, so I'm not quite sure why that is. Now putting on the bell as we're coming into the station. As you can see, we're down to around 25 miles per hour now. Now going to reapply the brakes once again, and we need to aim to stop roughly at the end of the platform, probably just before that. You can see the brake handle there just jumped up more than I intended it to. Certainly very easy to do, a bit like the Class 166 that we have on the original Great Western Main Line, where it's very difficult to control the brake settings. So here we are at Route 59. Departing Route 59, the starting speed limit is 70 miles per hour, and we've got around 3¼ miles to go to the next stop, which is Naperville. Now we're doing above 20 miles per hour. I'm quickly going up to full power as this train does not accelerate particularly quickly, especially with the fairly long consist which we have, which I believe is 7 or 8 double-deck cars. So I'd just like to say at this point that the UK signalling guide which I recently made, or should I say British signalling guide, has proved to be quite popular, and I've had some great feedback from that, so thank you to everyone who's watched it and given me feedback. I am now planning at some point in the not too distant future to do the final signalling guide that I feel needs to be done for now, which is the US signalling guide. Actually, I say that, but I'm also planning on covering the TVM 430 system on the London to Faversham routes. But as far as countries go, the US signalling guide I think is the final one to cover for now. And I'm hoping to cover that in the not too distant future. I may need some help and advice with being able to do that, as it's certainly not going to be easy to put together. But I think it will be worth it once I do, because US signals can be quite confusing, especially to those of us who aren't familiar with them. I would just like to say we have just been passing Naperville Yard. We now have a grade crossing coming up just ahead. It's slightly further away than I thought, but I can see it coming up, so I probably turned on the bell slightly early there. Once we cross this grade crossing, we've then got 1¾ miles to go to our stop at Naperville. Again, what I'm looking out for ahead is going to be a siding on the right-hand side. At that siding, I'm going to idle the power, as we've got around 3/4 mile to go to our stop, and then I'm going to brake at the next signal. Here's the siding coming up now. You can just see the track on the right there. I would say the siding with the trucks in, but of course you could be playing a different scenario where there's nothing in that siding, so you can't use trains as a landmark. I'm now going to idle the power, and I can now see the station coming up ahead, so I'm actually going to put on the brakes a little before the signal, as I feel that the signal may be just a little bit too late. Speed is coming off quite nicely, but I'm still going to increase the brakes a little more when the handle wants to go up. This time I was having problems getting the brake handle to go up into the right position. So we're slowing down nicely. We're going to enter the platform at around 30 miles per hour. Just realised I should probably turn the bell on, so I apologise for the slight delay there. Of course, not having bells on British trains, I'm not used to having to sound them, so it's very easy to forget. One question I do have actually, which some of you may be able to answer to also help, is are there different rules on the use of the horn and bell on the Northeast Corridor route? Because it seems to me that there might be, especially with a train like the M8, which actually doesn't appear to have a bell built in at all. So do you need to use the bell on that route? I know that there are no grade crossings that I've seen. I'm very curious as to rules of using the bell when coming into stations. And do you also need to sound the horn on entry and exit to stations on that route like you do other American routes? So that's something I'd really like to know. So if you could please let me know in the comments, I would really appreciate it. So here we are, arrival at Naperville. Departing from Naperville, the starting speed limit is 70 miles per hour, and we've got just over 4 miles to go to the next stop, which is Lisle. So after this video, coming up soon will be another routes learning video. I believe it's going to be in the UK, hopefully on a faster route, as I know I've done a fair few slow journeys more recently, so I'd really like to do something on a faster route. Also coming up soon will be another train guide video. I know I mentioned before about wanting to do the class 319 at some point. There's a couple of other trains I'd like to cover as well, and also I'd like to do my first American train guide video in the not too distant future. So I'm looking into trying to do some research and picking a particular loco unit. If you've got any American train you would particularly like to see covered by a train guide video, then please do let me know, as I'd be very interested in doing so. One of the things that I do think is a shame with this route is the fact that they've had to give us, unless we live in the USA, they've had to give us unbranded BNSF locos. Unfortunately, this is due to licensing issues and BNSF saying that they don't want their logo shown outside of the United States in this game. I'm not quite sure what the sense behind that rule is, but unfortunately we have no control over that, nor do Dovetail Games. So this is the first route that we've had, or where we've had trains which don't have that logo on the side. I know someone asked me the other day if this is the first time we've had a look-alike BNSF livery, but that's not the case, because I have the Marias Pass route and a couple of other add-ons, and they have the true BNSF livery with the logo and everything. So it's a recent development that we now can't get that outside of the US. As I say, I do think it's a shame, but there's not a lot we can really do about it. What I may do at some point is swap out the locos for other BNSF locos that I have, or wait to see if someone does an update where they actually put the logo on themselves. This overbridge just here at this junction, where we've got quite a few points, is 1 mile from our stop. What I'm looking out for now is the next gantry, which has a set of signals for the opposite direction on it. And then shortly after that there will be an underbridge, which I'm going to be aiming to use as our braking point. So I'm now going to idle the power at this point and allow the train to slow down a bit. I'm now looking out for the underbridge coming up just ahead. Looks like we can see it now. I'm now going to apply the brakes into their lightest setting, and that should bring our speed down about right. Okay, maybe not, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if our speed is coming off quick enough here. It might be. Judge that more in a minute. I'm aiming to enter the platform at no faster than around 30 miles per hour, and it looks like we actually will be. So I did judge that braking point about right. I'm forgetting the bell again. Now releasing the brakes for a moment, or else we're going to stop a bit too early. Allow the train to crawl along. It looks like here the end of the platform is probably the most appropriate stopping place due to this station building we have to our right hand side. Departing Lisle, the starting speed limit is 70 miles per hour, and we've got around 1 3/4 miles to go to our next stop, which is Belmont. So as you can see, so far we've been an all-stopper, and at this end of the route the stops are actually reasonably well spaced out. 4 miles here, 5 miles there, although a bit closer with this next one at 1 3/4. And then between the next stop and the one after, it's 1.5 miles. But after that the stops start to get a lot closer together on this route, so I am in a way glad that we're going non-stop from Downers Grove to Chicago. In fact, you'll find that some of the stops are barely 1/3 of a mile apart, and we're going to be going through quite a number of stations on that fast run through to Chicago. At this overbridge just here, we've now got 1 mile to go to our stop at Belmont, and I'm going to idle the power and coast in a moment. Now that we're doing 60 miles per hour, it's time to idle the power. I'm just going to allow the train to naturally start to slow down. There's no clear braking point along here, it's a bit of guesswork involved, but you can see the platform ahead where it's illuminated, which certainly helps us. It would be a bit more difficult, I guess, in the fog. But certainly by this milepost coming up here, I think you'd want to have the brakes on. Just put them on a bit harder than I intended, so I've just reduced the brake setting. And that's bringing our speed down quite quickly. In fact, I believe that milepost is probably the braking point for Belmont Station. So I'm now just fanning the brakes up and down to try and bring our speed down gradually to stop in the right place, which is near to, but I don't think it would be quite at the end of the station here, though I could be wrong. Oh, hang on, there's a station building to our right there, so I'm thinking it probably will be the end of the platform. Departing from Belmont, the starting speed limit is 70 miles per hour, and we've got around 1.5 miles to go to the next stop, which is Downers Grove Main Street. The speed limit will be dropping to 65 miles per hour shortly after the next signal. In fact, we will have a warning board for that before the 65 limit, which will be half a mile from the limit itself. Though that won't actually affect us, as we won't be able to get up to that before we have to start thinking about slowing down for our next stop. Once we reach the actual 65 mile per hour speed board itself, at that point we've then got around 2/3 of a mile to go to our stop. So I'm going to idle the power at the 65 mile per hour speed board, and then I'm going to be looking out for some signals just ahead, which are going to be 2 yellow aspects, indicating that we will actually be crossing onto the middle track shortly after our next stop. And I'm going to use those signals as the braking points for Downers Grove Station. So here's the 65 speed board. At this point I'm now shutting off the power, allowing the train to lose a bit of speed, and then, as I said, I'm going to brake at the next signals, which you can see coming up just here. brakes are now on the minimal setting. I'm putting the bell on already, as I believe there is a grade crossing this side of the platform. In fact, you can see it coming up just now, crossing the tracks just ahead. Now there's a time where you would sound your horn at any time, and that's in an emergency. You got some daring car driver there. I believe this should be about the right place to stop. Departing from Downers Grove Main Street, the starting speed limit is 65 miles per hour, though it's soon dropping to 35 miles per hour as we cross some points onto the middle track. And at this point we have 21 miles to go to our next and final stop, which is Chicago Union Station. So from this point we now have a non-stop run right through. And it's going to be 70 miles per hour speed limit most of the way. So as we're now reaching 35 miles per hour, I've just cut the power back to idle. You can see the point coming up just here that we're going to be crossing to the left. Shortly after crossing the point, the speed limit will be going back up to 70 miles per hour. And we can accelerate on the next right-handed point, which will be coming up in a moment. Now we've lost a bit of speed there, so I'm going to go straight up in power now, as there's no way that we're going to get to 35 or above before we cross this right-handed point just here. We're now passing through Fairview Station. We're now passing through Westmont Station. And now cutting the power back as we head towards 70 miles per hour, and I've got to try and keep an eye on that now just to try and ensure that we don't go too fast or too slow. We're currently in notch 5 of power. I'm going to see what happens to our speed here. So notch 5 seems to be a good setting for now, and if we speed up too much I will cut back to notch 4. We're now passing through Clarendon Hills. We're now passing through West Hinsdale. I'm leaving the bell on for now as we've got quite a few grade crossings in a row. I just don't see any point in turning it off. As I said, I'm not entirely clear on the bell rules, but I assume that I should be using the bell through these grade crossings. So if I'm wrong, please do let me know. Personally, I find the bell slightly annoying when the sound keeps on going. We're now passing through Hinsdale. We're now passing through Highlands. We are now passing through Western Springs. I'm just cutting the power back by a notch now as I felt our speed was getting too close to 70 and would soon increase above it. Now increasing the power slightly once again. I'm just going to be keeping an eye on that. We're now passing Stone Avenue. You've seen here now just how close some of these stations can be. We're now passing through LaGrange. We're now passing through Congress Park, and at this point we've now got 13 miles to go to Chicago Union Station. We're now passing through Brookfield. We're now passing Hollywood Avenue. We're now passing Riverside. Looks like I should have had the bell on there. I didn't realise there was a grade crossing right in the middle of the station. Indeed, I'm certainly putting the bell on here, and I just saw a car going across in front of me. So let's hope no more cars go across in front of me here. Although, of course, in the game you won't actually have a crash. It's certainly fun to pretend you might. I believe we're shortly coming up on Harlem Avenue Station. One of the things I've been slightly worried about with recording this long section with so many stops is that I'll get jumbled up, get the order mixed up, or miss one or something, so I hope I'm getting all of these in the right order, but I believe I am at present. So this is Harlem Avenue Station just coming up. I also apologise for the lag here. Sudden drops down. Unfortunately, there's very little I can do about that. I have even turned down the graphics settings slightly, and it doesn't seem to have fixed anything so far, unfortunately. We're now passing through Berwyn. We're now passing through Laverne. See, the frame rate has dropped nicely as we're approaching Cicero Yard, so if it's anything like when I was practicing this journey, it's probably going to be that ironically the frame rate smooths out as we pass this large yard, which has rather a lot of parked trains in it. Thankfully, the number of grade crossings is now going to reduce for a little while, so we won't have to cross too many and leave the bell on for too long. The frame rate has increased a bit, though it's still not smooth, and just as I say that, it's decided to drop a bit again. So I am finding the frame rates here just slightly on the annoying side. Still, it's now about 1 month until I can get the new PC that I'm hoping to get. And as soon as I do, then a lot of these lag problems should become a thing of the past. Not sure if I've told you the specs of the PC I'm planning, but I'm planning on getting an Intel Core i7 4790K processor with 16 gigabytes of RAM, so I'm doubling my current RAM, and also much faster RAM. I'm looking for 2400 megahertz rather than my current 1333 megahertz. And for the graphics card, I'm planning on getting an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 980, which I understand is a pretty good card. I would love to go for the 980 Ti, but unfortunately my budget wouldn't love it quite as much, so I'm aiming to get the 980 instead. So as you've probably seen, for the most part along here we've been doing around 65 to 68 miles per hour, for the most part just with the throttle set to notch 5, which seems to be pretty good for maintaining this train at a reasonably close speed to 70 miles per hour. See, the frame rate has now jumped nicely, so we're going a bit smoother. Quite ironically, the frame rate entering Chicago I found was actually fairly good on the whole, as we get closer to the much more built up area around the centre of the city. We're now passing through Cicero Station, and at this point we've got 7 miles to go to our stop. So what I'm looking out for along here now is a speed warning for a reduction down to 60 miles per hour, which will be around half a mile from the speed limit itself. This first speed warning you can see here is not for our speed reduction, that's for mainly a freight speed reduction. It's actually the next speed limit warning board that we pass. It caught me out yesterday when I was practicing this journey. So yes, it's the next speed limit warning board that we pass, warning us of the speed reduction down to 60 miles per hour. At that point, if I just idle the power, I shouldn't need to use any brakes at all, and the train should slow down to 60 quite comfortably. Another big drop in the frame rate momentarily. Though it is increasing again now, thankfully. I believe this is now the 60 mile per hour speed warning just coming up. Indeed it is. So at this point I'm now going to shut off the power and allow the train to coast, and our speed will fall off nicely. In fact, we'll be down to 60 before we enter the 60 zone. And then at that point I'm going to go straight back up to notch 4 to 5 power once we're at 60 miles per hour. So we're now down to 60. So I've now gone straight up to notch 4 of power. In fact, I'm going to increase to notch 5 and just keep an eye on our speed from there. You can see the 60 mile per hour speed board just coming up now. We're now about to pass through Western Avenue Station, and at this point we've got 3 3/4 miles to go to Chicago Union Station. Just after this, we're now passing Western Avenue Yard. We've got a warning for an upcoming 40 mile per hour speed restriction coming up, and that's over 3/4 of a mile from the speed limit itself. So what I'm going to do is idle the power at the big long overbridge you can see in the distance there. Here is the 40 warning now. Just going to cut the power back slightly. We're going to end up going above 60 miles per hour. For some reason the alerter will not reset. I am pressing the alerter reset button and the alerter reset is not working. Though it seems to have reset itself now. I'm not quite sure what was happening there. It was slightly annoying to say the least. So the 40 mile per hour speed restriction will be coming up very shortly. I'm looking out for that. In fact, I'm going to apply the brakes just before the 40 boards. I believe I can see them coming up in the distance now. As you can see, we're already down to 50 miles per hour. Indeed, I believe that is the 40 speed boards. But on the brakes, they're slightly harder than I planned. So I've just cut the braking now, and we're now down to 40 miles per hour in time for the 40 limit. So yeah, back to the alerter bug. I'm really not sure what happened there, but I'm very glad that it did decide to reset, or an emergency brake application would have happened. That's something I really don't like to see in my videos. Is I see the alerter is now going off again. I've got the flashing red light, which means the alerter will go off in a minute. We're having the same problem again as before. Is actually distracting me from the driving, so I better slow down as the speed limit is dropping down to 35 miles per hour just here. And now I'm going to leave the power in idle as the speed limit will soon be dropping down further to 25 miles per hour. I'm going to brake for that just before the 25 mile per hour speed board, which will be coming up in a moment. Just to say that the station we just passed through was Halstead Street Station, and it's actually at this end of the platform at Halstead Street. Just moved the power handle for a moment there to try and ensure that the alerter wasn't going to go off. That was slowed down slightly too much as we're now down to 25 miles per hour already. So it's at this end of Halstead Street platform where the speed limit drops to 35. And then I just leave the power in idle to generally slow to 25. And now I'm going to leave the power in idle a bit more in a second, as we've soon got a 10 mile per hour speed limit coming up, which is the final speed limit into Chicago Union Station. I have no idea why the speed limit is so low, because we've got just over a mile at 10 miles per hour. If the speed limit was even 5 miles per hour higher at 15, we could shave 2 minutes off the journey time here. So I'm not quite sure what the logic is of a 10 mile per hour speed limit. It doesn't seem like that there's any curves that really require it. I don't know if it's anything to do with signal spacing as we get into Chicago or not. But in a moment I'm going to slow down for the 10 limit, and 10 miles per hour is a very difficult speed to maintain in this train. You can now see the skyscrapers of Chicago just coming up. This is one of my favourite parts of the route, to be able to see all these buildings around us and feel like we're going into the city centre here. You can now see the 10 mile per hour speedboard coming up just ahead of us, just after this signal. Just before Chicago Union Station, as we go under the roof, we're going to have to temporarily stop at a red signal, which apparently seems to be stuck at red, because as soon as I request permission to pass the signal, it will be granted, and then we'll be able to pull into the platform. However, when practicing this journey and trying to learn the route, I learned this the hard way when I accidentally went past the signal at danger. And unlike in conventional scenarios, where it allows you to do so because I've unchecked the box that tells it to end the scenario, with career scenarios you can't actually do that, so it automatically ended the scenario right near the end, which was a bit of a pain. So now the problem here is maintaining 10 miles per hour. It's an absolute nightmare. The throttle is constantly up, down, up, down, up, down. As you can see, I've just cut off the power at 10 miles per hour. We're already down to about 8 miles per hour, which, as I said earlier, this train is slowing down just way too quick. We'll be at 5 miles per hour in a few more seconds if I didn't put the power back on. As you can see, we're accelerating fairly quickly back up to 10, and now I have to shut off the power again, so literally every 5 seconds or so the power handle needs adjusting to try and ensure that we can pull into Chicago without losing or gaining too much speed, as on time as possible. So yes, I'm very curious as to why this 10 mile per hour speed limit is here. If you know, please do let me know in the comments, because I'd really love to know why they decided to set these speed limits so incredibly low at this point, so that it takes about 6 minutes to travel a mile, which to me, yeah, it's just too slow. So yes, I noticed that there is a Genesis set with this route, which you can see passing us here, the Amtrak Genesis set, but I don't know if it's drivable or not, and it appears to be just a low polygon model for additional AI, so we've got a bit more variety with the route. So I'm continuing to adjust the power, however the next signal now is going to be a red aspect, so I have to bear that in mind and prepare to stop. I could just press tab and allow us to go through, but that just seems unrealistic. I'd rather simulate it as a failed signal. So it's the signal coming up on the right hand side, you can see on that stone pillar just there, is our signal. I'm going to stop about here and now request permission to pass. Permission approved. So now we can accelerate directly into the platform. The station here is a dead end, so we will be needing to stop close to the buffer stops coming up just ahead. Fairly long platform here. So as mentioned in a previous video, Chicago is a place I am hoping to visit next year, certainly to stay with a friend. And I do hope to be able to see this station in real life and see some of the trains coming in and out of here. And I'd really like to watch some trains on the racetrack route. I'm not quite sure why it has the nickname Racetrack either, so maybe somebody could also explain that to me. I know it's not necessarily to do with speed, I'm guessing it could be to do with the number of trains that travel along there. And that some trains end up overtaking others along that 3-track main line as well. That's my guess. I could be completely wrong there. So yeah, if you know, then please do let me know, because I'm really interested to know why it has that name. And so here we are, arrival at Chicago Union Station. Thank you very much for watching. I really do hope that you've enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. For the latest updates, you can find me on Facebook. The link for my Facebook page is in the description of this video. And also, if you value the work that I do and would like to sponsor me towards the costs of new equipment and future projects, then please visit my Patreon page for more information. Again, the link for that is in the description of this video. Once again, thank you for watching.